Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Ryan Girdusky. Thank you guys for being here. Over the weekend, I pre-taped a segment for News Nation that's going to air, I guess, later on about the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And, you know, in the less than 2 years I've done this podcast, the 9/11 episode of my mom, who worked in the World Trade Center, is still the most listened to episode. And so I think for this year, I'm going to do another 9/11 tribute. It's on a day I release a podcast episode. It's the 25th anniversary. I feel like it's very important to. So I'm going to think of something special, either people who worked with my mother or people who worked there that day, cops, firefighters. I also would love to talk to someone whose parent also worked there but didn't make it out. I feel like we would have a very interesting conversation about what our lives were like in a different way in reaction to the day, and when we found out, what news we found out, who reached out to us, things like that. I don't know. I will do something very interesting. I'm sure of it. I will spend some time making something very special, because as time goes on, there are fewer and fewer people with every passing year to talk to who were there, who remember it. I mean, 25 years has been a long time. It's like it's the same period of time as if like trying to find Pearl Harbor survivors in the late 60s, if you think about it that way. Like, that's how much time now has kind of started moving past us. So I guess mid to late 60s. I also have an uncle I would love to get on. He was a window washer. He's a Vietnam War veteran, but he will not. There's no way he's going to talk on a podcast. He's in that generation where you just don't talk about sad things. You don't have uncomfortable conversations. He's just, of that era. So anyway, that's something to look forward to for the future. I do have kind of bad news though. The public podcast episode I wanted to do, the live taping I wanted to do over in October, unfortunately, it's been postponed to 2027. It's not my decision. It came from a higher power, not God, but somebody between me and God, a higher power, is postponing my live event. So I will do one hopefully in 2027. I've really been pushing for one, but it just won't happen this October, unfortunately. All right, before we get into some political news, so I found this story in the New York Times. I want to preface by saying I'm not a drug person. I've never been interested in drugs. I maybe smoked pot 2 or 3 times when I was like a teenager, but it was never for me. I just don't like the feeling of losing control. My indulgence was always like a glass of scotch, a glass of bourbon on the rocks, and like a cigarette, like a Marlboro Light. That's a good time. I don't need anything else to make me feel like I'm not in complete control of myself. So that's that. I want to preface by saying that I've never really liked or indulged or anything to do with pot. So maybe that's a perspective you need to take into account, that I've not been a pro-drug person. I also read a book in my 20s called that really fundamentally changed the way I thought. It was called Henry's Demons, A Father and Son's Journey Out of Madness. And it was in England. It was about a kid who smoked pot, and I guess he had pre-existing psychological issues, and the marijuana was a trigger for them. Like, he was basically had dormant psychological issues, and he went into psychosis and was having schizophrenic like visions and stuff. It's a great book, but it was like, it really changed my mind about how the harmlessness of drugs. Because when I was growing up, they always said you can't get addicted to pot and it's completely harmless, and that's like that's the safe drug. It was kind of really pushed by the culture in general on, I guess, elder millennials. So that the book shocked me, and it changed my opinion. Well, anyway, as I grew more and more skeptical about pot, obviously the nation has like fell into reefer madness, where 24 states in the country now legalize recreational marijuana. 7 more states do not prosecute marijuana, even though it's still illegal. Like, you could basically just smoke and nothing's going to ever happen to you. And a big push of this came from the incentive that they have more tax revenue. Pot legalization has really increased tax revenue for the states quite substantially. In 2025, states had $4.57 billion in new tax revenue, up from $2.86 billion in 2020. So a massive, nearly doubling of this, inflow of money from marijuana legalization. Anyway, I have never waived my opinions that this is not great. Like, it's not great to be a nation knee deep in pot smokers. Well, a study came out. There's an article in the New York Times and a link to a study. The study was from the National Institute of Health and the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and it found that 9% of men almost 1 in 10 reported symptom of cannabis use disorder in 2024, up from 7% in 2021. The prevalence of cannabis use disorder also rose among women to nearly 6% in 2024, up from 5% in 2021. So not that much about women, but a chunk increase for men. At least the 2% is a big increase in a nationwide survey. Symptoms of the disorder include not being able to cut back or quit or continuing the use of drugs despite it leading to interpersonal problems. In other words, you've become an addict. Dr. Nora Velcro, from the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, said the notion that cannabis is not addictive is basically incorrect. She said the fact that cannabis products now contain much higher amounts than the past of THC, which makes the drugs makes the drugs more visible when you're using them. You are not just like giggling by yourself or falling asleep or having the munchies. You are becoming like a zombie because the THC levels are so high. Overall, cannabis use among all adults rose significantly. In 2024, 26% of men reported using the drug, up from 22% in 2021. Among women, 21% said they were using cannabis in 2024, up from nearly 18%. That is pretty crazy that 1 in 4 adults now are recreational pot smokers. That's quite a large chunk of people. And look, once again, I don't do drugs. So maybe, and I don't think any of my employees do drugs either. I've never had a meeting with my employee where I'm like, oh, they look like they're high. But I wondered after reading this article if 9% of men have like chronic addictive pot smoking, what percentage of those people are also not in the workforce? What percentage of the population of those women are not in the workforce? Like they are stoned out of their minds day in and day out that they cannot function as members of society. I wish that there was a study to actually look at that. The findings of the study suggest that those who used cannabis were at a higher risk of developing problematic use than those who drank, as fewer than 20% of those who reported drinking in the survey showed symptoms of alcoholic use disorder. So basically, less than 1 in 5 people who recreationally drink become alcoholics versus or use it every day to an abusive amount. A higher percentage of people who smoke pot regularly will become addicted to pot. And the problem is now that it is legal, you have all these companies that are not only making it and selling it, but they're in the free market to compete for you to buy their product specifically. So it's not just higher levels of THC, it is flavored marijuana, it is flavored levels of pot, it is alcohol now. I mean, I had a friend who showed up to a dinner one time it was a dinner, and they were drinking THC lemonade. They were looped. It was like being with somebody who wasn't there. Like they were there, but they were just, there was like the lights were on, but no one was home whatsoever. And these are extremely powerful drugs. I will say this, maybe like 2 years ago, I get products who send me all the time for the show and like things for me to promote. I got a product in the mail one day and it said relax during the day, and I'm very stressed. I am a high wired, high functioning person who has a lot of things on my plate at all times. And I saw it and I thought it was some like holistic thing. I took one without even reading the the bag at all. Turns out it was like 20 grams of THC. I was so out of my mind and in an uncomfortable way where I was having like a breakdown trying to walk it off, drink coffee it off, sleep it off, whatever I possibly could. It was awful. It was a genuinely horrible experience. But 20 grams, that is not like smoking a joint in like when I was like, that is such a high amount of THC. Even my friends who are more frequent pot smokers said that they would not take that much in one sitting. According to the American Psychiatric Association, symptoms of cannabis disorder include taking larger amounts for longer periods of time, having issues fulfilling responsibilities at work and school and home, continuing the use when problems arise in relationships, giving up on social, occupational, and recreational activities because of the cannabis use. And they also have confusion, memory loss, hallucinations, delusions, depressions, and sudden change in mood, lack of caring of physical appearance, and also they can change the chemistry in your brain. Here's my issue. This is why I brought this whole thing up, this whole story up that I found interesting. With the fact that RFK, our HHS secretary, is doing all of this examination into vaccines and other commonly used drugs. Do they have ramifications that we don't know about? Do they change things that we don't know about? Okay, fine. You're asking all those questions. I think personally, vaccines are probably safe. You could stagger them. I think that maybe, the schedule could be changed a little bit, but for children, but whatever. Overall, vaccines are great stuff. Can we do a little investigation into the side effects of recreational marijuana now that you can get it without a doctor's note? You don't need anything. You can pop into any store in half of the country and just get something that can get you high. And is there a study that should be done to see what percentage of the population has psychosis that is induced by overuse of marijuana? That's not a dumb question. Like, there is no treatment for cannabis use disorder. You have to go to a therapist, and you take years and years to do it, and you can manage it, but you're always addicted to it. And given that what's what we know, should we have a little bit more information? I mean, if I have to watch a commercial on television where they're trying to sell some, hair loss or boner medication, and you have to hear about chronic diarrhea as a side effect, you should know more about the side effects of having all these chewy gums and drinks and e-cigarettes that are filled with pot and high levels of THC that could have ramifications on you. They're not, I think, having this full conversation at a time when we're really having a lot of conversations about drugs and what's good and what's bad. The steepest increase in the prevalence in both mild and chronic cannabis use is among men and women between 30 to 50. So Gen Xers and millennials, the people who were sold the hardest that this is just recreational, there's no side effects, you can't become an addict. I'm sorry, if RFK has all this time to do all these research and numbers and data, we should have time where we're pushing for mass legalization of a recreational activity that is increasingly potent and trying to get people hooked on them at an earlier and earlier age. I'm not saying that there's, maybe a gummy that doesn't work or this thing doesn't work, but people should know all the consequences when we're pushing mass legalization. And the fact that science are now catching up and saying, no, this is actually something you can get addicted to and get addicted to for life is really important as we're all moving forward on this. Okay, I have some political news, some immigration news coming up next. Stay tuned. So I want to start off with some fresh immigration news. The numbers on immigrants being naturalized in the United States, those are people who are getting citizenship and they can vote. They get as many votes as you as I do, has fallen to 16,514 for the month of July, a 30% decrease since April. And it looks like fiscal year 2026, which is not over till October, so we have some time, but fiscal year 2026 will be the lowest year of naturalization since LBJ was president back in the 1960s. He won in 1964 to 68. This is a big radical change that's been going on under the Trump administration, which is far different than what we saw under Biden, under Obama, under the first Trump administration. Prior to that, the average number of immigrants receiving naturalization, the ability to vote and change our country forever, I need to emphasize that, was about 225 per 100,000 immigrants. During Biden's administration, it was over 250. I know that doesn't seem like a big number, but 225 to 250 is. That 225 number has basically been consistent for every president since Bill Clinton in the 90s. So 30 years of this very high level of naturalization, this push for naturalization. It is not the norm, though. I need to emphasize, before Bill Clinton, the norm from Harry Truman to George H.W. Bush was less than 100 per 100,000. It was substantially lower. It more than doubled under Bill Clinton, and it stayed that way for the next 30 years. And it is partially responsible for a mass change in our politics, is because we naturalized so many people, and every president just accepted, oh, because Clinton did this, we should all do this. That was George W. Bush, that was Barack Obama, that was the first Trump administration, and that was Biden. Biden actually even exceeded that number. So this is a big change. When you remember immigrants, with the exception of the last election, which was unique, and we'll see if it changes, going forward. But with the exception of the last election, recent immigrants vote out of 7 out of every 10 immigrants votes Democrat. It's almost a 2-to-1 increase. When you consider how high that naturalization has been, that naturalization rate has been, and multiply it by 30, you're talking about tens of millions of people. Tens of millions of people, and a complete change in how our politics is being done. So Trump reducing us back down to what our norms have been before Clinton is a good thing. I'm sure, the New York Times is losing its mind and saying this is not normal. This is actually what the normal looks like. It does not look like what we had for 30 years. Okay, another news story is over in Texas. Senator Ted Cruz is coming to the rescue of Republican Senate nominee Ken Paxton over in the Senate race there. Paxton has had horrific fundraising numbers. James Tellerico, the Democrat, incredible fundraising numbers, truly just mind-bogglingly high. And the ad game is overwhelmingly one-sided, where Tellerico is just pummeling Ken Paxton with ads. Apparently, money from Trump's MAGA Inc. PAC is coming. It has not yet to come, though. So we'll see when that shows up. It has not shown up yet. In the meantime, a PAC linked to Ted Cruz called I have the name written somewhere over here. It is called Truth and Courage PAC, is spending $1.7 million in the Houston market and on college footballs in Dallas and Houston. It is focusing on the Chinese purchasing of Texas farmland, attacking Tellerico for banning that practice. Tellerico, there was a bill in the legislature to ban Chinese nationals from buying up farmland, and Tellerico voted against it. It talks about how communist China is buying up Texas, the narrator says, and Tellerico was for it. Tellerico currently has a cash advantage, 22 million to 2 million against Paxton. Pretty substantial. And I mentioned on this podcast before that I had heard the grapevines that after Trump endorsed Paxton, people at the NRSC and at all the Republican Senate PACs told Trump's people, you're on your own. We don't have the money and the time for Paxton. You wanted Paxton. He's your guy. Best of luck. Call Elon. Like, that was allegedly kind of the conversation. So MAGA Inc. is supposed to be coming in with a big ad buy. They have $400 million cash on hand. They could do a lot for Ken Paxton. They have yet to do it. I think we have to wait until around after Labor Day, when the money we start seeing Republicans' response rate. We start seeing the $1 billion being pushed by Republican groups to see if there's any uptick in support for the Republican candidates going to these major Senate races. A lot of Republicans are kind of just all holding their breath saying, when's this money coming? When's this money coming? We'll see if that changes the situation. Why Cruz is jumping in, I think, is really important. Most senators would not do this. Most senators would not take their own PAC money, especially someone like Cruz, who wants to so obviously run for president, and he needs every penny he possibly can. Paxton and Cruz's relationship goes back quite a while. When Paxton first ran for attorney general, Cruz was an early supporter, and they have been ideological allies. Everyone thinks, everyone's Republican in Texas, they must all be conservative. There is a big splinter in some major positions in Texas among more center people, more right-wing people. And when Cruz got elected in 2012, he was considered the most right-wing person. He supported Chip Roy, who I think just ran for attorney general and lost the primary. He supported Ken Paxton. Like, Cruz has been building allies throughout Texas over the last decade, and Paxton is his most important ally. So Cruz really wants Paxton to win, and I think that's why he's stepping up. And that relationship is very solid and very serious. And what I heard, by the way, another piece of gossip I heard Paxton really wanted to run for governor, and he was had to be talked out of it, obviously, or decided not to do it because the sitting governor is running for an unprecedented 4th term, and there are no term limits. And basically, he's running for Senate as a seat warmer until he can run for governor in 4 years. But he's not long for this Senate job. He's there until he can run for Senate, and being in a place of significant statewide influence is very important to running for that. Now, there was also an interesting report by Notice. It's a new website called Notice, NOTUS, if you're interested, about how Democrats' play for November is really a redo of 2006. In 2006, the Democrats won 6 U.S. Senate seats, flipping it so Harry Reid could become majority leader. This was obviously as the Iraq War was raging and the economy it hadn't collapsed yet, but it was on the verge of collapsing. What happened during that Senate cycle is in very key races in Missouri, which at the time had a Democrat running for it, in Montana, and in Virginia, which at the time was a red state. The Democrats won 3 of those Senate seats, but failed to get a majority. What they did was really bank on the Libertarian Party, and the Libertarian Party got 2.25% in Missouri. That is a state that the Democrat only got 49.6% in. Independent candidate got 1.1% in Virginia, where the Democrat got 49.6 as well, and a Libertarian got 2.5% in Montana, where the Democrats got 49.2. Had the Libertarian and Independent not been there, the Republicans would have very likely won at least 2 of those 3 U.S. Senate seats. That is very important to think about. In this year's cycle, Libertarian candidates are on the ballot in Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. I would not be surprised. Just mark this date down. Come post Labor Day, you see a flurry of cash spends from Democrat aligned super PACs for the Libertarian Party, trying to get Republicans even 1% to cross over and vote for the Libertarian and flip those seats in November. There's a very real chance that James Salary cannot get 50%. Democrats know it, but he can get 49. And that's enough in a tight year when Libertarians are taking up 2% of the vote or 3% of the vote. Think of it. Only Maine and Alaska and Georgia require candidates to get over 50% to win a general election for U.S. Senate. Everyone else is plurality of the vote. The most possible wins. Everywhere else, you don't need a majority. And I'm not saying we should change it to Maine's standard, but I'm saying there is a percentage of the electorate that are angry at Trump that will not vote for a Republican. And they are going to, what I believe, they are going to try to get them to vote Libertarian in those 3 critical swing states. I would not be surprised. Third-party candidates have changed history before. In 1992, Ross Perot, that was a very, very big election. In 2000, with Pat Buchanan and Ralph Nader, they were a big deal over in Florida and other places. And then in 2016, Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, they made a huge difference in that election. I would not be surprised if we're going to see the same thing over and over again. So keep an eye on that. I will report more as we get more information. We see some ad spending going on. All right. Ask Me Anything is coming up next. Stay tuned. Now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email Ryan at numbersgamepodcast.com. That's Ryan at numbersgamepodcast.com, plural numbers. Without going into, this is an email from Ben. He says, without going into too much detail, I am currently a government worker for a state that I live in. As much as I love and enjoy that job I'm currently in as a government worker, I have considered maybe branching up into political work and campaign work if that door ever opens. When I think I currently have vast knowledge when it comes to politics and party dynamics, I am always wanting to learn more. What specific books do you recommend for enhancing my knowledge in politics and party dynamics? That is a tough question. I would say this. You're a state worker, so there's probably limitations on what you can and can't do. It is less to do with a book you're going to read than relationships you're going to build. What I would do, if you can do this as a state worker, I would volunteer for a campaign, even a state senate campaign, even a local campaign, and volunteer a lot. Be there a lot. Know how grueling and grinding it can be. You need to build a skill you're not going to get hired on almost any campaign as a speechwriter. Like presidential campaigns do that. Some Senate races do that, but some, very few. Most do not have that. Like, you're not going to get a job on a campaign to be a public intellectual. You're going to get a job on a campaign because you know how to data mine, because you know how to do digital fundraising, because you know how to do high dollar fundraising, because you know how to do ground game or volunteer operations, or you're going to have a campaign manager job. Um, I would build relationships with state party and county party leaders as a first initial step. Figure out who's running for office and get some kind of job on the campaign. But first, if you really want to do this, 'cause it is a grinding industry. It is not easy, and I've done every job under the sun. It is. I don't want to over romanticize anything. It is grueling and it is grinding, and no one cares what your opinion about policy. I mean, once in a while you'll have those conversations, but they are few and far in between. Just know that going in. And you're only going to learn the craft from actually doing it. You're not going to learn it from reading a book. I'll just tell you that right now. And one other thing, I mean, I had this one guy named Andrew who wrote to me. He was a dental hygienist. This is a couple of years ago. And he said, I really care about our country, care about politics. Should I quit my dental hygienist job and work in the government? And I got him a recommendation for an internship, and he got one, and now he's a top government worker, and he loves what he does, and he would never go back to being a dental hygienist. So sometimes it does work out, but realize, I think being a part of a campaign on any level to a high degree, you kind of learn it's not as sexy as you think it is. This isn't an episode of The West Wing. It's just not. It's very daunting, very grueling, a lot of data stuff. And I think that's what you really have to know before going into it. Okay, next question comes from Anthony. Anthony goes, Ryan, love the podcast. One, why are the polls in the Democratic primaries getting it so wrong when it comes to highly publicized candidates like Hong and El Said? We talked about that during the polling episode with Zachary Danini. Part of it is that the universes are too small. They're estimating, they're thinking only a certain amount of people are going to go vote, and a lot more are voting. That's a big reason. Secondly, I think they're reporting numbers from non-college educated white voters, which are overwhelmingly swinging against a lot of these DSA candidates. They're nailing it on the black voters. They're getting their percentage of black voters pretty correct, but they're not getting their numbers with non-college whites accurate at all. Second part of the question, I've always considered the Democratic Party the high party, just waiting for their marching orders regardless of the person or issue. I want to say one thing. I want to preface that. That is what a lot of Republicans feel with the Democratic Party. That's also what a lot of Democrats feel with the Republican Party. It's very ironic that they both feel that way about the party. I fully expect all politicians and media outlets to fall in line, but given how 50-50 some of these primaries have been involving DSA candidates, will it fracture their votes? For instance, will moderates not show up for El Said, or will the crazies not show up whoever beats Hong? That is the question I have been asking myself since the elections. I've really thought about this, especially for Hong. Usually more radical purists are the ones to stomp their feet and say, I'm not playing ball. But those are the Bernie bros who did not vote for Hillary, right? I don't know if they have any opposition to Crowley. Crowley seems to be a fairly likable person. We'll have to wait and see. He's fairly pro data center, which, I mean, Hong was anti data center. I mean, like, is there an issue that I'm saying that fractures them? I'm not sure. When it comes to Michigan, I think you have a different story. One, I don't think that moderate Jews are going to vote for, moderate Jewish Democrats are going to vote for El Said in big numbers. I just do not believe that. The fact that he campaigned with Hassan Piker, who is anti-Semitic, and has said things that are not kind to the Jewish people. I think you'll see those part of the party fragment for sure. Some suburban housewives. It was interesting when the race for AG of Virginia was happening, and the AG candidate had said, that he wanted to kill Republican children. The people who voted for Abigail Spanberger but did not vote for the Democrat for AG were wealthy suburbanites. Those were the George Bush, Mitt Romney Republicans who became Democrats. I wonder if they will do the same exact thing for Mike Rogers. It's a possibility. I'm not sure if it's true, but it's a possibility. They may hold their noses. Definitely Jews may hold their noses. There was one black Democrat assemblywoman who in Michigan who just endorsed Mike Rogers as well. So there's a handful who have fractured off in the El Said case. I think he's just so extreme. He's the one where you're seeing certain splinters, but it's a tough road. It's a tough race for Mike Rogers. Nonetheless. Okay, last question from David. There have been an explosion of X posts recently about the major increase in Muslims in our country and the belief that Islam is taking over the United States. I've had discussions on H-1B abuse to the foot washing stations at the DFW airport for Muslims winning elections. With the 25th anniversary of 9/11 coming up, do you think this will bring more widespread attention, i.e. mainstream media and Congress, DC class, to the issue? The rise of Islam in America since 9/11 seems to be an elephant in the room, save politicians like Brandon Gill and Chip Roy willing to discuss. I think many Republicans are too scared of being called racist or Islamic phobic. It seems like last year's 9/11 memorial was overshadowed by Charlie Kirk's death on September 10th. Do you think the 25th year will be a come to Jesus moment about the rise of Islam in the United States? So the thing is I've been to Texas a number of times for political events, and it is the question of Muslim growth is probably in these Republican circles, even among donor groups, is the number one most frequent question being asked from donors. People see mass demographic transformations in their towns that they're living in, especially even in wealthy towns outside of Dallas, and they're uncomfortable with the rapid speed of change. I will say two things. One, it's not all Muslim immigration. What we're seeing is a lot of Middle Eastern immigration. Some of them are Hindu, some of them are Punjab, some of them are Sikhs. Punjab is not a religion, rather Hindu and Sikh. It's just a rapid overall change of populations that are not Christian, not Western, don't have an identity in it, and are coming in such large numbers. When you look at populations like Frisco outside of Dallas, that's mostly Indian. They're not Muslim, but they are, I think they're close to a majority, if not a majority, and it's a majority over a span of 10 years. It's just such a rapid population change. And I remember back in 2008, I was volunteering for the Ron Paul campaign, and I had a conversation with a writer named Jack Hunter. And Jack and he was from South Carolina, and Jack and I were talking about immigration. And Jack said to me, there is a little Mexico in South Carolina, in my city in South Carolina, and I could not believe it. Immigrants are for a thing for places like New York. You guys get them, we don't. And I said to Jack, I remember this conversation, I said, Jack, New York is going to be all of America because of mass immigration. There is no stopping it. There is no slowing down. There is no way of saying you can only live in these certain zip codes. That's not what's happening. Trump has greatly reduced immigration from Muslim majority countries, greatly reduced from immigration from Muslim majority countries. But the problem is, I think for a lot of people, one, it's too late the population has increased rapidly. We used to have 2.35 million in 2007. Now we have about 4.5 to 5 million Muslims living in America. I think the problem for Republicans is, one, the numbers are a little overblown for what you think there is. I think people think there's a lot more than there are. Even if Muslim immigrants more than doubled, or more than increased by 500%, they would not make up 10% of the population of Texas. However, that uncomfortableness with rapid immigration changes is only going to increase substantially. It is not a question of just Muslim immigration. It is all immigration. You have to remember, you have to think to yourself, look 20 years in the future, look 5 years in the future. Where are the places that people are having large populations of children who can move places? Moving places is a 30 plus person age thing. And also where recent immigrants have broken the barrier of entry. So we have populations from these places. It's from Muslim majority and sub-Saharan African countries. That's the future of what immigration looks like. We need a transformation of our legal immigration system, not just a knee-jerk reaction around Islamic immigration. That will not do much or change anything. I think the rise of socialist left-wing candidates who are Muslim is very eye-opening. I think it pops a bubble in this Ted Cruz notion that all these legal immigrants will just all become as American as you and me. And they're running for office and they're saying, I hate this country, I hate the values. They're all white supremacists. We need to abolish all these parts of America that you and I love and know and grew up with and come from families that built it. It's our legal immigration system. That's what we need to have a come to Jesus moment about, not just specific Muslim immigration, all legal immigration, because I promise you the situation is going to get worse, not better. And a Democratic president, if the laws aren't changed, a Democratic president will just, change everything that Trump's done with closing and reducing illegal immigration of Muslim countries. All right, that's this episode of this podcast. I appreciate you all for listening. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and give me a 5-star review on any of these apps. Also, follow me on YouTube. Really helps grow the channel. I appreciate you all. Talk to you Wednesday.